Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am your gracious and faithful host, Captain Frodo, and we're back here with episode 4. This time we will look into some more ridiculous things, but first I'd just like to say that the pandemic is still raging, which is making the world a tremendously and remarkably unusual place for us showfolk. There's never been a time like this before. No shows anywhere. I did hear that shows in Japan had started back up again. Shows in Norway can be of certain size. There has been school shows are still happening and Zoom shows are still happening, but the landscape has completely and utterly been demolished in a sense. Our foundations are still shaking, and the ramifications are hitting Las Vegas very hard, and it is hitting me personally also very hard, both on a home level and when it has to do with my work. So big things are shifting, and when everything really is just as fluid and liquid as they are right now, the only thing for me to do is to get aboard my showmanship and just sail above it all, weather the storm. The wind is shaking the palms outside my caravan here, and I'm seeking a new fancy place, a new star in the sky to set my course by. One of the interesting things that happened this last week was that an interview that I did a couple of weeks ago finally came out in writing, and it was amazing for me to just be able to see an article about myself, but not just about me and about the latest trick I had developed or the latest show that I had been hired by, but instead that it was talking about this very podcast here. It's been very nice. It's very nice to be able to talk about these ideas also in other forums than just here on the ether with you. And the article was very nice in what it had written, and it had this little section that I thought fitted well with what we are going to talk about today, where it says, "For a man who makes a living twisting his arms, tossing confetti and looking clueless, Captain Frodo's podcast is surprisingly deep." And it's just this turn of phrase, surprisingly deep. I love that, and I think for a clown, which I have identified with a clown both as I was performing in Circus Oz and as I have been performing as what I felt like a sideshow clown. I've always been looking for the laughter from when I was a street performer or in my father's shows. And what we're looking for today is exactly this dichotomy of surprisingly deep. Before we start, we will take a closer look at the different sides of the clown or of the fool. Because the fool has at least two sides, and the two sides that we will be looking at today is the difference between the silly and the sublime, because in some ways the Joker has similarities with the functions of a monk. Obviously the monk is kind of on the upper side and the clown is possibly on the lower side. Yet there is this interesting link as well between the holy fool or the blessed or touched by God, which is also can be another way of looking at the fool. But both characters, the monk and the fool, are also pointing towards a different reality. The monk is dedicating his whole life to solitude in many cases and to the knowledge of the world beyond, of a religious world, be it Buddhism or be it Christianity. They might live in a monastery, practice meditation, practice contemplation, and to discover depths of a different kind of world, and they are, through the light of what they learn in their monasteries and their contemplative practices, they see the world differently than the rest of humanity. And seeing a monk, meeting a monk, talking to a monk, whether you're walking along the streets of Thailand and you see a Buddhist monk sitting by the side of the road with a little bowl in front of him, you are reminded that there are more than one way to live in this world. And that is a similarity that comes with the fool. The fool is also reminding you by poking fun at everything that you hold dear. It makes fun of striving towards becoming rich or any kind of desire. The fool will be there to be kicked in the butt, but he will get back up again, and you will laugh at him knowing that you are laughing at yourself. In this sense, we see both pointing towards reality as not quite as fixed as what you might think it is when you don't think about it. If you don't think about it, everything seems to be fit in its own place until somebody starts poking at it, and in a Socratic way of a million questions, or by keep poking fun at every single thing that you say, you will eventually be left with this confused feeling of your foundations have completely fallen away, like we all are at the moment. That's what the clown, and potentially also a religious leader or a monk, might be able to do with you. Destabilize you. See yourself in a new light. The Fool is the first card of the tarot at both the beginning and the end. It's a new beginning. It's where you get back to when you have come full circle. It is also the knave fool that is there at the beginning when you first start out. Because I think within these two different sides, like two different sides of the coin, he's dancing with both the silly and the sublime. Within this, you get this beautiful kind of truth that can be told just by the clown, by somebody who is so low down on the rank of status that you're not being quite as vigilant with your protection of yourself. And then a particular type of truth can come out. For instance, I have this thing when I'm doing an act, I like to do this mix of emotions where something is both hysterically funny but also surprisingly moving. For instance, when I go into the circus ring and I sit down on a funny little chair and I get out my saw, and then I do some gags with the musical saw, but they don't know that I'm going to play music yet. And by the time I actually start to play music, it is so silly, this idea of a man with an upside down saw between his knees in the center of the ring, that everyone's kind of giggling. But then I love this twist almost that comes when I then start playing, and often I play Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which just obviously has beautiful connotations to it of another world and all of this. And as that song comes and the beautiful haunting sound of the singing saw hits them, it has that ethereal quality, like something from beyond, like an elf or something that's singing far away. And in that moment they're going, this is so stupid, yet it is all so beautiful. And that is something that the clown really excels at, mixing these two different emotions. And I think that is something very very particular to the clown. And within there you get that feeling of the silly yet the sublime. And I think part of the strength of the clown lies in this dual nature of the holy and the stupid. I have also found that then in my own work, then I have, since I first started out as a magician and assistant in my dad's magic show, and then I went on to do circus, and eventually I fell into freak show and sideshow. I was deeply fascinated, of course, being a punk in my teenage years. This suited me really well. But even when I was doing extreme things, I was always going for laughter. And I found that humor blends really well with the extreme, since a lot of laughter comes from a build-up of tension and then a release. That's a build-up of a joke, and then a punchline releases the thing, and you can build it up with the tension of doing something extreme. So, I mean, I am a humorist, but I rely on entertainment by unease. That's been a lot of the acts that I do. Most of my acts, actually, that I perform are sideshow acts. Now, the nature of most sideshow acts are that they are shocking, and most sideshow or freak show that you see, the only thing that the freak show artist plays at is this shock effect. They try to turn it up, whilst with the show that I was in, and together with the 3 other people for almost 5 years with a happy sideshow. It was me, Captain Frodo. It was the Space Cowboy, Shep Huntley, and Tiger Lil. We really tried to add something different to this. We thought sideshow was particularly fun and exciting, and we wanted to share that kind of feeling with everybody. But even within that show, we had a certain style, big beats. It was a very exciting, hyped up kind of show, and it was through a workshop that we had with Derek Ives, the late great master of dark clowning from Australia, that we were looking for an expansion of our acts. And it was there that I sort of came up talking to Derek Ives. Became about expanding the possibility for meaning by growing the scope of emotions that we played with. And there was this bit of text that I had come up with, and we just added that to this routine where I would be lifting a beer keg with this clamp that I clamped on my nipples on my chest, and that would start with me coming out onto the stage with these high boots on and some very old-fashioned sort of swim pants, and I would say, let's see if I can remember it. Back home in Norway, my father is a traveling magician, so I spent my childhood on the road. And it was on one of these tours that I first ever met that sensational Scandinavian muscle man, Rasmus Nielsen. And it was he who taught me the secrets of the carnival strongman, what he called the way of the berserker. The violent winds and the weather, he said, has shaped the rugged coasts and mountains of good old Norway, and somehow this very nature of the land has impregnated the Norse people's souls, so that in here, deep inside, there lies a rage and a state of furious anger that can make you stand all pain, lose all fears, and achieve the impossible. The Vikings knew these secrets. Rasmus Nielsen most certainly knew. And now I know. Behold the new strongman of the North. I am Captain Frodo. Upon which I would proceed to get the large metal clamp, squeezing my titties, and then I would lift actually, at the biggest part, we lifted 2 beer kegs of these massive, what bars get where the beer is in. And it was a very ridiculous thing. But there's somehow that in this act, I was delivering it with great earnestness. And I find that a lot of culture, it's hard to be really earnest. But if you are ridiculous, if you are this clown, there is this resource that lies that you can tap into, where you can be completely authentic, completely truthful, and say things that you really mean, but it can still be taken on without feeling cheesy or so, because of this particular nature of the clown. Because the fool's kind of starting point is that all that's going on in society, it's all games, fun and games. He sees everything as a kind of game playing, which is why when people, take their game seriously, which people do, whether it be religion or it be business or it be politics, when the fool comes in and gets the giggle on, because he knows that all is a game, then people can get very angry, because this is not just a game or entertainment. This is not frivolous. This is serious. But when the clown comes in and starts flipping with these things, it can really be extremely demoralizing if it's touching on something that you thought was secret, Not secret, I mean sacred. Or maybe it was secret too. So I think the clown is a perfect delivery tool for truth, because he can take a grain of truth that can be watered down in his act. There can be a whole lot of stuff going on, but there is this grain of truth in there that you can't deny, and a grain of truth can be watered down like, so many grains of powdered Kool-Aid. But if the truth is too strong and you feel like the clown is turning too much into a priest or a preacher, then it just feels too strong, like you've put too much Kool-Aid in the water, or the other way around. And if it's too strong, then it tastes artificial and plastic and chemically sweet. So how do you mix your clown Kool-Aid to get your crowd to drink it? That is the question of today. And as we go on with today's essay, I'll be exploring all these topics, and this is the first, but it's not the last time we will be talking about the fertile character, the fertile archetype of the fool. And with that, it's time for today's essay. Clowns and truth. Clown truth, if you will. Since the dawn of humanity, clowns have danced a closely intertwined dance with truth. This dance is a fundamental feature of their timeless attraction. Truthfulness is, behind a mask of grotesque ridiculousness, what makes a clown connect with us. As long as his expression comes from a place of authenticity, the clown gets to say and do things others wouldn't dare. The clown is a liminal character, polarized between the lowest social standing and a unique position of receiving attention, which in and of itself is a form of social status. Attention not just from common people, but also from the rich and powerful. In medieval times, the court jester was a clown in service of a king or some other elevated nobleman. In this role, jesters had unique access to, literally, the most powerful persons in the land. On top of that, he had a unique permission to speak the truth. The jester's freedom to mock or contradict rulers is described in records from all over the world. Throughout history, India, Persia, China, and Europe all had their own versions of it. Here are some examples from Aztec regent Montezuma, who lived from 1502 to 1520. He said of his jesters, and I quote, "They frequently pronounced some important truths," end quote. And in Erasmus's Praise of Folly, Erasmus lived from 1469 to 1536, and in his Praise of Folly he writes, quote, "They're the only ones who speak frankly and tell the truth, and what is more praiseworthy than truth," end quote. We must assume kings were fully aware of this aspect of their fool's role, so they would take great care in selecting their court jester. To gain the privilege of being taken care of and to possibly assert influence, the clown had to deserve it. Only masters of their craft would have gotten the honor of becoming a court jester. They would have had to be able to improvise and to have a broad palette of skills to draw upon and combine, as they in essence would perform to the same crowd repeatedly. Obviously, they would also have to be compatible with, as well as being stimulating to, the individual king's humor, taste, and temperament. From the jester or clown's point of view, an important part of their education and development is to discover and develop a truthful representation of themselves. A character which can fall down, juggle, sing comic songs, tell stories or what have you, and come across as being truthful and himself throughout all these enterprises. They need to be able to pretend without pretense. Here comes a long quote now from Ezra LeBanc and David Bradel, who wrote a book called Clowns in Conversation with Modern Masters, which is an excellent book, something worth checking out. Quote, "The clowns who are masters are themselves. They make something wonderful out of who they truly, deeply, and simply are. They don't hide or conceal themselves in clown character to appear as someone else, or someone good, or someone right. Yes, they do borrow routines, shtick, and ideas from one another and their predecessors, and true, they frequently belong to a long performance lineage, and have learned, as apprentices, specific techniques that perpetuate a certain tradition. And yet, whatever material they perform, whatever character they present, they enter into their clown persona as a way of being more generously themselves than they might be under usual circumstances. Every time we watch one of them, we don't view a form or a character or a concept. We see simply them." End quote. There were, of course, particular, if unwritten, rules for the way these transgressive expressions of truth could be presented. Guised in silliness, displayed and expressed from a grotesque and lowly state of dignity, the king would be free to take from it what he wanted and discard the rest as jest and absurdity. If the king sifted out a grain of truth from the jester's rants and then chose to take it to heart, it was more likely for that grain of truth to fall on fertile ground. The jester could speak truths, but the telling of truths is not just a matter of stating facts. Earth is not the center of the solar system might have been a fact when it was first uttered, but it was not experienced as such by the vast majority. The type of truth best expressed by jesters and clowns is not factual truth, what the German filmmaker Werner Herzog calls the accountant's truth, but rather the kind of truth the clown expresses is what Herzog calls ecstatic or poetic truth. And here comes a quote from Werner Herzog about this. "If facts had any value, if they truly illuminated us, if they unquestionably stood for truth, the Manhattan phone directory would be the book of books." End quote. That's Werner Herzog from A Guide for the Perplexed. Facts might reflect objective reality, but they do not illuminate. Only truth illuminates. Poetic truth is an experienced truth, greater and more powerful than any fact. It is a process of communication where a recipient experiences someone's expression as a deeper and more visceral truth. Poetic truth is not separate from human participation. It is not something which is, it is something which happens between humans. Poetic truth is artificial, meaning, quote, made or produced by human beings rather than occurring naturally, typically as a copy of something natural. A poetic truth is fact artificially crafted to make emotional connection. For poetic truth to happen, there needs to be trust between the presenter and the receiver. The king would have to trust his fool. For this trust to develop, the fool had to express his self. If the king felt his jester spoke the opinions or truths of ministers or bishops, chances are the fool would have had his privilege revoked, possibly by having his tongue ripped out or head chopped off. The process of truth and the process of telling truth is a delicate business. As the clown attempts to do so, there is always risk. Risk of failure, not the kind of failure which is mimicked in the clown's performance, which in actuality is only imitation of failure, so well crafted it really is success. It's rather a failure of communication, a failure of connection and of understanding. If any of these three factors fail, the truthfulness of the clown, the particular truth expressed, or the king's experience of either, the clown risks death. The historical jester, whose truth broke down, could probably face literal death. Today's clowns risks dying on stage. Certainly not as bad as death, anyone who isn't a clown would say. Yet the clown's truth is the clown's soul. When a clown dies on stage, the truth of his self fails, without which the poetic truth of his message can no longer happen. What dies when a clown dies on stage is his soul. Without it, the clown is reduced to a soulless clown zombie, wandering undead in grease paint, with a red nose being but an empty shell, a fate on par with death by royal executioner. It's zombie clowns like this roaming shopping centres and birthday parties, which is giving clowns a bad name all over the world. The truthfulness in the jester's persona is the key to his privilege as truth-teller. When a clown successfully acts from his heart, the wellspring of poetic truth, truth can happen and rings true. In this subtle yet powerful process comes great power. Laughter and levity lowers the mind's defense mechanisms, and the cynicism and distrust recedes. The listener's own heart becomes exposed and turns into fertile ground. In such moments, the heart of the jester can speak directly to the king's heart, and under these peculiar circumstances, a lowly clown can plant the seed of poetic truth in the king's heart, a seed which has the potential to sprout into governmental reform. If a clown whispers his truth to the king's open heart, change becomes a possibility. Change of heart, change of mind, change of world. And again, the response has been tremendous. Thank you so much. I've been reading some of the reviews and they're so sweet that it's almost giving me a toothache. So lovely. It really makes all this make sense for me. Thank you. That's really all that I'm going to say. If you go over there, even just to go to iTunes, which is the place where most of these reviews are, and have a look, just read them. And if you agree with them, then click the 5 stars, and if you think you could improve on them, just write your own review. It really makes a difference. And if you do know someone that 1. likes to listen to podcasts, 2. is interested in the arts and craft of showmanship, or is interested just in looking at the world through a different lens, even if they're not particularly interested in showmanship, I think there is thoughts and ideas in what we talk about here that could benefit the most jaded of us. Even if you don't think you like fools or clowns, perhaps there might be something in today's essay that you might find interesting. And with that, I believe all that's left to say is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you all along the way.